Good morning. It's a kind of a dreary Monday, kind of a weird way to start the week, dreary and rainy. But we have a lot of good topics to talk about this week. And I'm going to start this first one with something that came across my desk yesterday, and this sometimes happens. And last week, I made the big announcement on my Political Paula show on Facebook that, I am no longer a Democrat, but that I still disagree with Donald Trump on a lot of things. But again, something was on Facebook yesterday about something that Mr. Trump said 2 years ago in 2014, 3 years ago now. And I find myself agreeing with him. And the message of this show is just because you don't like the messenger doesn't always mean the message is wrong. And this had to do with the Ebola scare that this country faced in 2014. And if you remember the story, as I do well, because I had seen and read a lot of things about a possible pandemic or epidemic in our country, and the catastrophe, the utter end of life as we know it forever incident that it could be. We had two doctors, a doctor and a nurse, who had voluntarily gone over to a country in Africa to do missionary work. And during that time, they were infected with the deadly Ebola virus. And make no mistake, Ebola isn't the flu. It's not a cold. It's deadly. It kills most of the people it infects, and it is highly, highly contagious. And in a tweet, which I did not read, I was not on Twitter in 2014, but these tweets are coming back now supposedly to haunt Donald Trump, and yet I find myself agreeing with them. Donald Trump said it was a huge mistake for the American government to allow this doctor and nurse to be transported from Africa back to the United States, carrying this highly contagious, deadly disease, and it was. I agree with that. That was a mistake. Look, we all know that some doctors and medical professionals, they have a calling. A lot of religious people have a calling to go to underdeveloped countries and do good works, to either preach or to provide medical care. And that's their choice, and they have every right to choose that. But what they do not have the right to do is to become infected with a disease that in America we don't have. Our American citizens are not exposed to that disease and bring it into our country. And our government should not have allowed them to do that, because what ended up happening, and it was, I wrote it down, it was Emerson University Hospital where these two Ebola patients were taken. And people were exposed to Ebola. Some people were quarantined, and quarantine is not fun, folks. The government in hazmat suits comes in to your home and says, you can't leave, and we are going to take everything you have, decontaminate you. You cannot see anyone. You can't leave your home. And that's really, really scary. And people were quarantined because at Emerson University Hospital, there was no protocol. It had never happened before. When you have two highly contagious, deadly virus-infected people, how do you protect your staff from being contaminated? Remember back, and I love connecting dots, and this is another dot. Remember back when AIDS first started coming out, and I know a few people who worked in the medical profession who were stuck with needles while treating a patient. And if the patient refused an HIV test, that person who was stuck with the needle had to get HIV tested for a year before they were cleared of being infected, because they could be infected. Many medical professionals were infected with HIV while treating HIV patients because there was no protocol. And at Emerson University Hospital, many of the medical staff, and in fact, I believe one of them was even allowed, after treating the Ebola patient, to get on a plane to go try on wedding dresses in North or South Carolina, possibly exposing everyone she came in contact with on that trip. That is how lax the protocol was for treating these infectious disease patients. So when Donald Trump said there is no way that two people, just because they're American citizens, should have been allowed to come into this country and possibly start a pandemic in this country that could turn into an epidemic and infect a lot of people with a disease that we are not familiar with in America because we don't have it here. Donald Trump was right. And this brings me to something else about America and how we treat certain groups of people. And I'm talking about vaccines. And this is going to carry over into our show tomorrow about autism. In America, parents who play the religion card can opt out of vaccinating their children for very serious diseases, such as measles, mumps, rubella, and whooping cough. And by doing so, diseases that we thought we eradicated back when I was a child, when I was born and vaccinated for all of these things, my husband as well. Nobody in our school ever had measles. No one had mumps. No one had rubella. But now we're seeing outbreaks all over the country, serious ones, where measles are back. And it is because of these parents who, for religious purposes, are refusing to vaccinate their children. And for some reason, they're getting away with sending them to school, public schools. Even though public schools say before your child comes to school, you have to prove you vaccinated them. But if you can play that religion card, my religion doesn't believe it, then it's an attack on your religion if they don't let you get away with that. And what ends up happening is the more children that aren't vaccinated, the more chance it has of bringing the disease back up. And we're going to have to start fighting it all over again. And then people my age, people like myself and my husband, whose vaccinations have probably worn off, to the point that if we are exposed to measles right now, we will get them. And at our age, it could kill us or cause permanent damage to us. We would have to go run around and pay out of pocket and get vaccinated all over again. And that's not right. There is also this myth because, and we're going to talk more about this tomorrow, so you want to watch tomorrow's show, that autism is caused by vaccines. Now, remember last week, I spoke on Facebook about breast cancer patients. 80% report that they drink milk on a regular basis. Therefore, milk may cause breast cancer. And of course, that's not true. Now, we see a group of parents who doctors cannot tell them why their child was born with autism, why their child is so severely, in some cases, violently disabled, to the point where they can't raise them on their own. Their child is non-communicative. It's a horrible, horrible illness. And instead of, it is a genetic illness, and parents don't like blaming themselves. And no one wants to tell a parent, it was your genes that caused your child to be like this. So because like 80, 90, or 100% of children with autism were vaccinated as infants, well, let's blame the vaccines. And so many parents now are saying, my child was severely brain damaged and disabled because of the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, which is not true. It's not true. But it's scaring parents, and many parents who refuse to vaccinate use that as an excuse. And they get away with it. Millions upon millions of children in this country, myself included, every person that is related to me, all my cousins, my husband, his family, have all been vaccinated, and none of us had any side effects from those vaccines. We were a little cranky as babies when we got our shots, maybe a little red spot. That's it. If you don't vaccinate your dog in this country, if you refuse to give your dog a rabies vaccine, and the authorities find out about it, first of all, you're going to either be fined, lose your dog, or if your dog happens to bite or scratch somebody and that person reports you, and you don't have a rabies certificate, your dog will be killed. And yet we are allowing parents to play the Jesus card and say, I'm not vaccinating my kids, it's against my religion, or my kid will become autistic if I vaccinate my child. They're using fake science and religion to get out of protecting not only their child, but an entire society, everyone that child comes in contact with from these diseases. And it's not right. And if you look at what the experts say, and we've all seen the movies, Outbreak, we've all seen the movies where a pandemic hits the United States. Many experts say that what is actually going to be a catastrophic world-ending event is not going to be a nuclear war. It's not going to be done with guns or bombs. It will be a pandemic. It will be a virus or a deadly contagious disease that either we've never seen before or that has been weaponized by terrorists that will wipe us out. It'll be an extinction level event, Ellie. An extinction level event. And it will not be a bomb. It will not be a nuclear missile from North Korea. We already know that smallpox and anthrax can be weaponized. And we know for a fact that the general public is not vaccinated against anthrax or smallpox. I can't go to my doctor and say I want an anthrax vaccine. I probably can't get a smallpox vaccine. I had one as a child. I have the vaccine certificate to prove it. But the only people now that are getting smallpox and anthrax vaccines are military and some physicians. I'm not sure, maybe all medical professionals. I'm not sure about that. But I know that us ordinary folks out here that are going to be the first ones exposed are not being vaccinated, and we're not offered the vaccine. And that scares me a little bit. It scares me a lot more than the threat of a nuclear war. It scares me a lot more than a terrorist threat. And let's remember something else when we talk about Trump. Many people disagreed with Trump's travel ban because it was a Muslim ban. I disagreed with it. But many people agreed with Trump on this, that we need to keep Muslims out, all Muslims, just in case one or two terrorists got in with them. The same thing needs to be said for somebody who is infected with a deadly contagious disease there is no known cure for. And there's no vaccine for Ebola. And if 2 American citizens get themselves infected in a foreign country, that's very sad. But we have to look for the greater good of the American public. Millions and millions of people. And all you need to start a pandemic is one person going to a country, getting infected with an Ebola-type virus, and coming home on a plane before they have symptoms. And no one knows they have it. They get on that plane. There's 300 people on that plane. They're all going to different places. He sneezes on that plane. He spits on somebody on that plane. He coughs on that plane. Everybody on that plane has been exposed. And then they go home and they expose their families. Then they expose their workmates. Then the kids go to school and expose their schoolmates. And you can see what happens. You can see what happens. When the AIDS virus first started appearing, there was one very sexually active airline steward. He was patient 0. He had no symptoms whatsoever except a little skin cancer on his neck. They didn't know it was AIDS. He is directly responsible for infecting over 40 people directly with HIV. And then anybody that they had relations with or shared a needle with if they were doing drugs, they were exposed. One person, maybe 100 cases of HIV can be directly linked back to one person. These are how pandemics and epidemics start. And you have to remember, HIV and AIDS is bodily fluid. You can't cough on someone if you have AIDS and give it to them. Ebola, smallpox, these other diseases are airborne. Just by sitting next to a person, you can catch it like a cold. By sitting next to someone who has Ebola, you can get Ebola. And that's scary, how quickly it could spread. One person on a plane with 300 people could wipe out this earth. It could be an LE, Extinction Level Event. So you got to think about that. And just because Donald Trump said it 3 years ago doesn't mean he was wrong. He's wrong on a lot of stuff. Believe me, I know. He wasn't wrong on this. And I agree with him 100%. 100%. We do have to be very cautious. And once again, the message for today is just because you don't like the messenger, you might not like me. Don't ignore the message. Do your own research. Think about it. Think about what I said. Think about how much sense it makes to not allow anybody who voluntarily goes somewhere else to do good works, whatever they're doing, to come back here with a deadly virus. Sadly, sometimes you do have to sacrifice one or two for the good of the many. And it would have been tragic if that nurse and doctor had died. They both survived. And we're very happy about that. But they also caused a panic. They exposed other people to the illness. Those people had to be treated. They had to be quarantined in their homes. They were pariahs in their neighborhoods. They caused a nationwide panic. And then again, because we didn't know what we were doing, people who were exposed to this virus were allowed to get on a commercial airline and travel to another state. That's not containment. That's not keeping it contained. When you get a virus that you know you can't cure, that kills most of the people it infects and is contagious, the most important thing is containment. You keep it located in as small a space as possible. And they didn't do that at Emerson University Hospital in 2014. And our government didn't do it when they allowed 2 Ebola-infected people to enter our country and put us all at risk. And when our government tells a religious group of people, of parents, that they can use their religion to refuse to vaccinate their children, putting all children, all people they come in contact with, especially people my age, whose vaccinations we had as children have long worn off, but we didn't need them because the diseases were eradicated, and now they're back. If I'm around a child who has not been vaccinated for measles and that child gets measles, I'm going to get measles. And at my age, that could mean my death. That child would have just murdered me. Or actually, that child's parent, by refusing to vaccinate, would be guilty of my murder. No doubt about it. And if I got sick from measles and I lived, I would sue that parent in court. For all of my medical bills, all of my pain and suffering, I would sue that parent for not vaccinating their child. Because that's a crime. To purposely put somebody in danger of contracting a deadly disease. So again, I don't like Trump. I don't. But on this subject, he's right. And I hope you guys will not worry about who said it and maybe just take my word for it, because I think the facts I've brought to you today are valid. We do have to worry about weaponized bacteria or biological warfare with weaponized diseases that we have no idea how to fight. And we've proven that by what happened at Emerson University Hospital during the Ebola outbreak, or the Ebola issue. It wasn't an outbreak per se, but they did everything wrong. They exposed their staff, and then they allowed their staff to leave the state. So we already know that we're vulnerable here. And the way to protect us is, yes, put a travel ban on anyone who has traveled to countries where Ebola or any other contagious, deadly disease is rampant. The possibility they were exposed. Test them, quarantine them before they are allowed back into the United States or any country where Ebola is not a big issue. France, England, Germany. These people should not be able to travel anywhere if they have been infected with this kind of a disease until they are given the all clear. And I am more worried about this situation that I've discussed today than I will ever worry about a Muslim or a group of Muslims coming into my country or visiting my country. This is much more serious. So stay informed. Don't dismiss a message just because you don't like the messenger. And be good to one another. Respect one another. And parents out there who are not vaccinating your children, if you're listening, which I doubt you are, but if you are putting innocent people at risk for serious illness by not doing that. And I hope that you can sleep well at night, because I know I wouldn't be able to. Political Paula, out.